I'm Janelle Benjamin, and welcome to another episode of Twice as Hard. I am here today with Abenaa Hayes. She is a DEI health equity strategist based in New York. She's just founded her new consulting firm, Elise, and providing corporate DEI strategy, social response frameworks, health equity strategy, and a range of healthcare communications and marketing support services. Abenaa, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janelle. I'm so happy to be here. Thankful to be joining you live and direct from Brooklyn, New York.
I am really happy to be with you again. I'm the founder of All Things Equitable. Don't forget to hit the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel. I hope you've been enjoying the episodes, everyone. I wanted to have this conversation with you, Abena, about the notion that Black women have to work twice as hard in the workplace. And we've had conversations through this series that really chronicle the experiences that Black women are having and letting employers know the various ways that they can support us through our experiences there. Can you share a little bit about your story, your journey, perhaps even to founding your own company, and why this is a question or a conversation that's really important for you?
So I'll say, first of all, this conversation is an important one for me because one, I do believe there's power in the stories that we have to tell, because there's a lot that we build from a community perspective there. But more importantly, our stories help with empowering others around us. And I'm a firm believer in making sure that I not only make a way and pave a way for those behind me, but that my story hopefully serves as one of inspiration. I also just think this is important because I came into corporate America by way of going to graduate school here in the United States. I'm not an American. I was born in Canada, but raised in Trinidad by two fiercely proud Trinidadian parents, and, came here for opportunity and to build a career. And, my experience is one that not only was unique of being a Black woman, but also being an immigrant, because I not only knew that I had to probably be overqualified and overcredentialed even to get an entry-level position, but I even needed to prove myself even more so because I'm not American. And there are a lot of stereotypes and microaggressions that I learned and experienced coming here. One of my very first jobs, I had someone who tell me that I needed to learn what it was like to be a Black person in America, because obviously coming from a place like Trinidad, where we had a majority Black culture and also a very multicultural country, coming to the US was obviously a culture shock. And hearing someone tell me that I needed to learn that I needed to, work my way up, know my place as a Black woman was quite a jarring experience, just knowing that I came in with a lot of enthusiasm and an eagerness to learn and grow a career.
What do you think that person was expressing to you? Because I myself have expressed that to others who have come from foreign countries to Canada. And I always say, being Black in one part of the world is one thing. Being Black here in Canada is a completely different thing. Or wherever you came from, you may not have the same or similar experiences. What do you think they were getting at in that commentary?
I think
was there validity in it?
Right. I would say, knowing this person, there was no validity in it, because one of the things that she actually admitted was the fact that she kept referring to herself as a redneck, right? She also admitted to having issues around class, right? In addition to issues around race. Like she very, proudly said she grew up poor, white on Long Island, right? So she had that kind of experience, if you will. And then also just knowing the American kind of system and construct had a very distinct point of view in terms of the place that Black people had in America and the work, if you will, that Black people needed to do to show that they were worthy. And she actually called out Black women in the company who she felt had done the work, if you will, to make it to where they did. But in the process, she didn't realize that she was showcasing all of her racism via all of her microaggressions. And what was interesting to me, because this was like my first job in New York City, there was a gentleman who worked 2 offices down who actually reported her to HR because he was horrified. But I mean, there was a lot of like blatant and overt bias and racism that was kind of embedded in her mindset. And she felt that she was teaching me a valuable lesson, but what she didn't realize was that she was committing all of these infractions. And I think fortunately for her, it was at a time when HR was probably going to be too afraid to take action against her. So they kind of let her bullying and her aggressive behavior kind of just fester.
You're bringing something up that is kind of mildly triggering for me in terms of, having quote unquote helpful people try to guide and navigate Black women in spaces, but it's actually harmful. It's done in sort of this like passive aggressive way in which they're pretending to be helpful and to kind of show you the ropes, so to speak. But meanwhile, they're derailing your efforts, or they're sidelining you. They're redirecting you to alternative career paths, and giving you lesser work or projects that are beneath your level of experience. It's showed up for me in quite a few ways, and it's interesting thing that we can add to the series. Just the undertones, right? People think that microaggressions, those subtle slights or put downs that make people feel invalidated or left on have to be so direct, right? They have to be identity based, or we're saying something that is related to an aspect of your character. But sometimes it truly is just that helpful guidance, right? That we didn't ask for.
Right. It's like, I mean, all this unsolicited advice that they think, like you said, would be helpful for a career that's actually detrimental, right? And in some of it, I mean, a lot of it is driven just based on people's perception, again, of where we belong, right? What our place is. But more importantly, there's likely a fear of the gifts that we actually bring to some of these situations, right? Because the minute you start trying to box people in, you're diminishing a lot that they can probably contribute to a workplace or a specific situation. I'm reminded of another work scenario where, hired into a role, lots of excitement, and worked with a manager who said, you have a lot of potential, but, she's like, there's certain things that you need to, be mindful of. So for example, she didn't want me telling people that I grew up in Trinidad, because she said, well, that's where the nannies and the housekeepers come from. Because when you look at New York, right, and, people of a certain socioeconomic class, a lot of the people who do domestic work here are from the Caribbean, right? And so she thought that my national identity was actually going to be to my detriment, right? And what she didn't want to acknowledge is it actually helped her in a situation with a global client, right? Because I had a totally different lens and approach to managing a situation with a client who was based in Europe, which she didn't have because she'd grown up here. But she was so biased and thought she was really, truly doing me a favor in terms of how people were going to perceive me, that she tried to box me in. And it's, when you think now of the world that we're in, where everyone's woken up now to DE&I and actually trying to not only cultivate, cultures of belonging, but actually celebrate people's backgrounds. It's really just ironic how much of that people try to stifle and squelch, when it's actually the things that are going to get us to more inclusive spaces. It's going to get us to better work cultures. It's going to get us to just better ways of operating.
Yeah, you're raising something that's really important too. And it's that as Black women, we're certainly not a monolith, right? In both of the stories that you've shared thus far, we see that sort of common thread where, you're being painted with one brush, right? But at the same time being told, you're different, right? You're from Trinidad. You're not going to be treated the same way here as a Black woman, right? It's something different to be a Black American woman than a Black woman from the Caribbean, which I think there's a little bit of validity in that. And then, in terms of the treatment and the experiences, but at the same time, in the second story, you're getting that same undercurrent that you're not a domestic, you're not like other Caribbean women, and you have something a value to add, right? To impart in an organization, and that you shouldn't be seen in the
Mhm.
same light as a domestic or as any other, to truly just judge you based on, you know, your the merit and the your work product and things that you can achieve, right, based on your qualifications. And so it's really interesting that, you know, as Black women, we have to combat that in the
Mhm.
workplace, right? The notion that we're all the same, we're all alike, and their experiences with the last Black woman is going to be the same experiences that they have with you. Are you seeing that come up at all in your work with organizations in your consulting firm?
Um, I am. However, I think there's now the beginning of an understanding and appreciation of the fact that our experience is indeed varied and diverse. Because I'd say, like, prior to starting to my consultancy, when I was still working in the agency world, a lot of people were still focused on that monolith perspective, right? I would say that with the advent of social media, right, and a greater focus on kind of stakeholder capitalism, I think people are now more open, right, to learning and seeing and hearing more about people's cultures. I think it helps that we have people from the Caribbean diaspora and other diasporas who are like leading celebrities. I'm thinking of like Rihanna, for example. So people start to realize that there are cultures, right, out there across the African diaspora that are interesting, right, bring meaning and some level of cultural relevance. And I also think that if I just look at the last 2 years and look at the request I'm getting from clients, I think people realize now that they can no longer just ignore the world that they're in. Their employees are demanding it, right? You can no longer get away with being silent. You can no longer get away with ignoring the Black and brown people who are in your organizations and the needs that they have. You can no longer ignore just the experience that we're having with all of the body blows, with all of the events that are happening in the world. You need to stand up, you need to speak out, and most importantly, you need to really, truly look after your people, right?
Yeah. You create social response frameworks through your work. And I'm curious, what does that look like? Or what would you add to a social response framework so that an employer responds to Black women who work twice as hard in the right ways?
I would say, first and foremost, they've got to center their response to key events that they deem appropriate on the needs of the Black women in their organization, right? Um, More often than not, and I'm sure you've heard this in your conversations, we talk about doing this work, we talk about responding, but it's often done through the lens of the majority, right? We know that Black and brown people, particularly Black women, right, are some of the most marginalized people in these corporations. The only way you're going to get to equity, the only way you're going to get to inclusion is by centering your needs on them. And when you look at the issues that we're navigating around discrimination, around reproductive justice, around gender rights, we know we are the ones who are most affected by it. So as you're sitting in that room, looking at like the priority list of all of the things in the world that you know you need to possibly react and respond to, right? Look at what your Black women need and make sure that those needs and your response also ladders up to your values, right? Because if those two aren't centered, you're going to look performative. And as I say, you know, we see a lot of companies in the world now who seem to be vying for the Oscar, right? For the best statement, right? Or for the best, you know, perspective or for the best program. But at the end of the day, it needs to truly be authentic and it needs to be rooted in the need and founded in your values.
Yeah, I actually wrote a blog post that people can find on my website at allthingsequitable.ca on how to write an appropriate company statement or corporate statement in solidarity with Black lives, because so many were missing the mark. So many, you know, performative blunders were made that I felt like, you know, okay, here's a roadmap, you know, just so that you don't get it wrong. So people can go take a look at that. And I think it's really important work that you're doing through your organization to help combat the experiences that Black women are having in the workplace. Too often, people are saying, well, you know, what are they complaining about, right? But if we look at the data, if we truly look at the data that tells us that no matter where we are, you know, whether it's not for profit, private entity, governmental organization, you name it, our experiences are quite similar, and you can apply the lessons learned through this series to pretty well any of those, NGOs, even types of environments. Why do you think that that might be so? Like, how would you say, being a Black woman and working twice as hard has come up for you? And why would you say that no matter what organization you put us in, we still tend to have these similar experiences?
I honestly think it's rooted in a refusal by the majority to acknowledge the power dynamic and to let others lead, right? Like you said, I mean, we could have all of the degrees, we could work the 12, 18-hour days, we could show up, be there for people, we can be the super token, right? Which Dory Tunstall talked about in Fast Company a few weeks ago. But at the end of the day, there's a fear behind seeing us in those leadership roles. I mean, the number of Black women who sit in the C-suite are few and far between, right? We know about women like Ursula Giddens. We know about women like Melody Hobson, right? But it should not be that way, because when you think of the qualifications that we bring to the table from a representation standpoint, it should look dramatically different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the mere fact that it does not in 2022, it's like a prima facie case of discrimination, right? Rampant discrimination. We have the qualifications more so than any other cohort at this time, especially in the United States. Study after study has told us, that Black women are the most qualified. In many cases, we are overqualified, and yet we are not represented to the same extent. And I like the fact that we're talking a little bit about the power dynamics at play. When we talk about oppression and we talk about our experiences, that's an important conversation to be having, because that oppression is occurring no matter what, like I said, what context you put us in. We're having to work twice as hard in order to overcome many of those hurdles. Where did that notion that you needed to work twice as hard in your life come from for you?
Well, I would say it probably came from growing up in Trinidad and seeing the work that the women in my family put in, right? Now, you come from a family where academic achievement is very important. I think that's a common thread in a lot of cultures. But given the patriarchal society that they were growing up in at the time, they knew that they had to come with all the receipts, if you will, to be able to accomplish what they accomplished. And I would say that just knowing the time in which, say, my mother grew up, right? There was a lot of opportunity for people coming out of the independence movement following the end of colonialism to truly rise and make a contribution. So my mother, for example, was the first woman appointed as a judge to the Labor Relations Court in Trinidad. And she was one of a cohort of 5 women who were the first women appointed to the judiciary in Trinidad and Tobago. That was a huge deal. But seeing all that she put in to get to where she got to at a young age, because she was only 33 years old when that happened, was a huge feat. So I saw that in her. I also saw it in other members of my extended family, right? Because they were all working to help build different businesses or contribute in their careers. So that's where it first started in me. And I think it became even more pronounced when I moved to North America and I saw what I had to navigate, right?
I think that's an important discussion, because when you're in a majority Black country, or a country, I shouldn't say that, because it's it's probably 50-50 Indo-Caribbean as well, but in a country where you don't have white people, let's just be frank, you don't have that notion that you need to work twice as hard, right? That notion always comes up in relation to white people, right? And the oppression that specifically comes from them, and the fact that they have so much power. So when you're in a country in which that is not at play, and the power dynamics are between, the Afro-Caribbean and the Indo-Caribbean, instead, you may have competition, you may have, you work hard, certainly, right? West Indian women work hard for sure, washing the
Mhm.
laundry by hand back in
Yeah.
the day, and
Is that
line
more?
drying their clothes, sweeping out the house from front to back. My family's Trinidadian as well, so I get it. But you don't have this idea that I need to show up and be more than or better than the white person beside
Right.
me in
Right.
order to receive the opportunities. And so when you come to North America, you learn really quickly, either by people like the woman that you encounter, that, hey, wait a second, knock, knock, knock. This is, it's a different ball game. Or you learn that intuitively, right?
Mhm. I would say for me, it was not only just intuitive, I actually got the talk. So
Mm,
like the talk we got was be mindful of what country you're going to
right,
and what it means to be a Black person in the US, right?
right.
So we had the commitment to achievement, but then we knew coming into this construct, it was going to be different, right? You know, in that talk, we were told about how we needed to, kind of comport ourselves when we like went into certain neighborhoods, how you like interacted with the police, all of those things. And at first, you're coming to the US as a teenager, you're like, I don't need to pay attention to this. I'm gonna like just enjoy it. But then you very quickly see how it all plays out. And I'm grateful for my mom and the aunties who gave me those lectures before I came here.
It's interesting that they would even know that, right? They would know to give you that advice, that your experience is going to be different than it is in Trinidad. And was it because they had lived here for some time prior to your arrival, and that they were able to sort of impart those lessons to you?
And
Okay.
that's part of it.
Yeah.
Um, my parents lived here for a brief moment. I had an aunt who went to school in Canada.
Yeah.
So, you know, the headline was being Black in the Caribbean is dramatically different from being Black in the US. And,
Mhm.
they're like, if you want to learn what it's like to be treated terribly as a Black person, come to the US.
Yeah. My family learned that the hard way firsthand. My parents both came here in the 70s, and they probably both would say they had a rude awakening. I don't think anybody would have been able to give them that talk. They would have come with, wide-eyed optimism, about, lands of opportunities, and just the opportunity to raise a family and have and do more. And then, being hit boom with oppression, with boom, you're not gonna succeed to the same extent, and you're going to have to struggle. And so for me, a child of immigrants, it's like I've grown up seeing them struggling firsthand with in their careers, in their, seeing the tears, seeing the times that they were beat down with words, with lost opportunity, with, trying for more, and having that fail. And it's been a thread even in my life as I've pursued education, higher education, and still, despite, 2 degrees and doing all the things my parents dreamed of for myself, still having those struggles. And so it truly is a real thing that I hope that the viewers, after watching many episodes in the series, they take away that is a true thing. What are the ways, Abena, that you are currently working twice as hard? I know you've just founded your own consultancy, so I can imagine, as somebody who runs a consulting for myself, I understand how difficult that can be. Tell me a little bit about what you might be going through at this time.
So I'm definitely doing the juggle and the dance
Mhm.
between building the business, securing the clients, establishing my brand look and feel, getting my thought leadership out there, and still trying to have a life. It's a lot.
Yes, yes.
Um, and I would say one of the things that's helped me is having community with other Black women who have been down this path or who are doing the work.
Mhm.
But reaching out for help is hard for us, right? Because we're so accustomed to having to shoulder the burden and do it all ourselves, right? And
Mhm.
so I will tell you, in building this in the last 6 months before the launch, there was a lot that I was doing. As we say in Trinidad, I was doing the chief cook and bottle washer. I was doing all of it
Yeah.
without the rest. right? Because we don't always give ourselves rest.
No, we don't. No, we don't. I barely sleep. I bought myself an Oura ring, and it tracks my sleep patterns, and I don't get 6 hours sleep a night, and I need to do better, right? Because that's going to take a toll on me over time, on my, my mental health, my well-being, and just how I show up in the world. So yeah, we definitely need to rest in the midst of doing all the things in support of our clients, so that we can provide the best advice and be our best selves. So I wish you all the best with your new venture. Hats off to you for all the clients that will come your way. How can people get a hold of you if they want to work with you?
So I've launched my website, which is www.eliseconsulting.co. And I'm also on LinkedIn under my full name, Abenaa Hayes.
Okay, thank you. And that's elise.co, spelled like the Champs-Élysées.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for being a guest on our show. Thank you all for watching the episode, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Twice as Hard. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janelle.
Okay, bye-bye.